Today I'm going to show you how to make this Leopard Gecko feeding / calcium dish. If you're like me and you have leopard geckos, then you know using a bottle cap for their calcium is actually quite convenient and probably free. But in my experience, they walk through it and dump it over, make a mess in their enclosures. So I came up with this idea, and I thought while I was making a more sturdy calcium dish for them, I would combine it with a feeding dish as well. So you can see I'm just using the 1 ounce plastic cups because I keep these in the house for my crested geckos anyway. So, and it'll actually keep mealworms in there, and I have not had a mess in the tank that this has been in since I've put it in there. So it's fairly easy. It's a little time consuming, so you have to have patience to make it, and it'll be like a 3-day process for you, but it actually looks sort of natural. It takes up less space in their enclosure as well by doing it this way. So what you need to make this are a few pretty inexpensive items. You need some unsanded grout. I would recommend getting a colored grout, like a beige or brown or something, so it's just easier to see what you've put grout on. If you happen to have white grout laying around the house, then you can use that, and you can just put a couple of drops of paint in it to color it, and it makes it easier to see where you've applied the grout and where you still need to, especially when you get to the second coat. You also need some adhesive, and I recommend this Power Grab. A lot of people use hot melt glue, but I have found that it doesn't adhere to styrofoam very well. It'll eventually pull loose, but this stuff is actually made to use with styrofoam, among other things, of course. You need something to mix your grout in and a paintbrush to apply it. Some knives to cut your styrofoam with, or a hot wire, which is what I like to use for most of the work, just because it's easier and less mess. Of course, you need styrofoam, which I've got a couple of pre-cut blocks here just to make it a little easier. Some paint, paint brushes, a spare bowl to mark your styrofoam with, and a marker, and some non-toxic play sand. This is really fine sand. It's the stuff that people buy to put in kids' sandboxes. So if a piece just happens to fall off of it, it's so fine it's not going to cause any damage to your gecko, and it's also non-toxic. And last but not least, you'll need some Shields-All. At least this is what I use. It makes anything you apply to it water resistant. It's not waterproof, so you can't really use it in an enclosure that's high humidity or on something that's going to be sitting in moisture all the time. This stuff it's a little expensive to buy. This is the smallest quantity that you can buy it in, but once you get it, it lasts forever. Some people use hodgepodge. I'm not sure if it's toxic to lizards or anything, and I know that it cannot be used anywhere around moisture. It just won't stand up. It'll just swell and make a big mess. So you can use it if there's not going to be any moisture around your project, but this is what I recommend. So hang tight, let me get you on a tripod and I'll get started. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is cut your styrofoam blocks out, which I have already done, just to make it a little easier. Because I'm only using a 1-inch cup, one of these pieces is just thick enough to hold that cup. So what I'm going to do is draw out where I need to cut these holes out for the cups. So I'm just going to trace it. I'm going to use my hot wire. You can use a knife. It's a little bit harder, but you can use a knife to cut these holes out. But it's easier for me and quicker to use the hot wire. And making this little cut in here isn't going to make a difference once I get the grout on it. Hot wires make it so much less messy. But now I've got my holes cut out. And you'll see this, it looks a little bit big, but by the time you fill in the inside here with the grout, it'll actually make it fit a little bit tighter. So it doesn't matter if it's a little too big, but it will matter if it's too small. It'll have the cups sitting up too high, and you want them to sit flush if you think you can get them to. So the next step, we're going to the power grab adhesive. I am running really low on. And it doesn't take a lot of this, so all you're going to do is just put little dabs here and there. That's it. Now you wait for this to dry, and depending on, like today it's a humid day here, so it's going to take a while to dry, but if it's a nice dry warm day, then it'll usually dry to the point that you can go on with your project after about 30 or 40 minutes. So I'm going to set this aside now and let the adhesive dry before I do anything else with it. Okay, my adhesive is dry, and now I'm going on to the next step. Once you've got it glued together, the next step is, you can do this before or after you glue it together. I prefer to do it after, just so I can shape the piece as a whole rather than trying to fit pieces that I've already shaped together. So you're just going to want to take a lighter, or I'm not sure if a heat gun will work. I've got one, but I have never tried it. But this is the safest way to do it, with one of these. So we're just gonna, you don't want to hold it in one spot. You just kind of want to wave it around. It'll take the edges off, the corners. But if you hold it in one spot too long, believe me, it'll set it on fire. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Okay, set this out of the way. I am also running really low on grout. When you're mixing this grout, the very first layer you want to be fairly thin and watery. Since I'm down to the bottom of the bag, mine's getting a little chunky, so bear with me while I break it up. And just add a little bit of water at a time and mix as you go. just about the right consistency. Still fairly runny, which is what you want. Okay, this is where the waiting comes in. This is where you have to be patient. This will have to set for probably at least 12 hours. I usually start projects like this first thing in the morning, and that way by evening time I can get my second coat on. When you're doing something like this for a small lizard like a leopard gecko, you don't have to put more than 2 coats on there. You just want to make it heavy enough so they're not going to be able to tip it over or move it around. So the first layer you want to put on there is fairly thin, and then when we come back and do the second layer in about 12 hours when this one's dry, then we'll make the second layer a little bit thicker than this. So see you in about 12 hours. Okay, we're back to put our second coat of grout on this, and for the second coat you want to make sure that the consistency is a little bit thicker. This is more like the consistency of maybe ketchup or mustard. If you remember, the first coat was kind of soupy, and this one is just a little bit thicker. If you were going to use this for a larger animal, then you'd want to put a third coat on and make it even thicker than this, just to give it more weight. So I've already done the bottom. I did the bottom off of camera. So now we're just going to do the top and the sides again. If you notice this is a different color, it's because I ran out and had to go get some more, and I just didn't get the same color this time. Okay, there we go. Now we'll let that set for probably take 18 to 24 hours for this one to set, because it is thicker than the original layer was that we put on. So I will be back when this sets and we'll start painting. Okay, now that we've got 2 coats of grout on here and it's set, now we're going to start the painting process. Okay, now we're going to let this dry and then come back and flip it over and paint the bottom. Okay, the top is dry enough to flip over. So I'm just going to turn it. And hopefully I've got enough paint to get this bottom done because I mixed this color myself. Okay, looks like we're good to go. We'll let that dry and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so paint's dry, and what I'm going to do is just take my little fine brush and I'm just going to paint a little bit of detail in. You don't necessarily have to do this. I mean, it's up to you how you want to do it, but I want to bring out some of these crevices a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to let that dry for a few minutes and then we'll be on to the last painting step. Okay, this is the last step of painting. And what I'm going to do is just dry brush some highlights on here. I'm using a fairly stiff brush and I'm wiping off as much paint off the brush as I can, and then I'm just going to lightly brush pick up the high points. Just going to add a little texture. Okay, we are getting there. Now, what we're going to do is coat this with some stuff called Shields-All. This is a water-resistant, non-toxic coating. And it kind of reminds me of Elmer's glue, but you dilute it down with some water and it makes it really runny and easy to work with. So we're just going to coat the entire thing, and I'm actually going to put 2 coats on this, so it'll take a little while to dry. But we are getting there. We're almost done. Okay, we're going to let this sit for about 30 minutes to dry, and I'll come back and flip it over and do the bottom. Okay, looks like the top and the sides are dry, so go back to coat the bottom. Okay, we'll let that sit for another 30 minutes. Okay, I went ahead and gave the bottom a second coat just so you wouldn't have to watch me do it on camera again. Now this is the last coat that we're going to put on here, the All Shields. But this time, as we put it on, we're actually going to sprinkle some sand in it. Because I don't know if you can see or not, but that's got kind of a glossy finish and it makes it a little slick. So the idea is to make this look semi-naturalistic, so we don't want the high gloss on there. And another thing the sand is going to do is give a little grip to it, so when the gecko gets up on there, there's no chance of him sliding off. So I'm not going to worry about doing the inside. I am going to put a second coat of the all shields on the inside where the bowls sit, but I'm not going to worry about putting sand in there, because you're not going to see that part of it. You don't have to put a lot, just sprinkle it on here and there. And this sand that I'm using is children's play sand. It is not ripped sand or anything you can buy at pet stores. This is made for children's sandboxes, and it is non-toxic, and it's very fine grain. So if by chance a piece does fall off and the gecko ingests it, it's not going to hurt him. Okay, we'll let this dry, and there's one last step, and we'll be done. Okay, this is the last step, and this is provided you use the sand, which I guess I should have mentioned was optional. You don't necessarily have to put the sand on there, but I prefer to. So all we're going to do is take a stiff brush, and we're just going to brush any loose or excess sand off. Okay, I believe I got it all. I'm not seeing anything fall off now. I keep brushing it aside just to make sure. And that's it. It's done. Put your little cups in there and fill one with calcium and worms, or worms and water, or whatever you want to put in there. I use mine for calcium and worms because I just don't like the mess in the cage with them dumping the calcium all over the place. So, and this is a pretty lengthy process to make these, so you have to be patient once you start it, and you can do like I do, and that's have in mind multiple projects that I want to do, and I complete each step of each project at the same time. And while I was working on this, I have 3 geckos, so I wanted to make 3 of these, and I already had one that you saw at the beginning of the video. And I made this one on camera for you, and off camera I was also making this one. And at the same time, I was making this. It's a corner hide. And the same process has been followed for all of these. And this is another piece that I made. This really is just for climbing on. It's not deep enough to be a hide or anything. I was just playing around with it to see what I could do with it. But there will be videos. I was working on a video of this corner hide at the same time that I've been working on this video, so I'll have the steps of this one as well in a video. So I hope you like it, and be patient if you're making one, or try to make multiple pieces at the same time. And it's cheap, it's easy, just a little time consuming. So thanks for watching.